is the Right Brain podcast, where we help you become a working writer by answering your questions, sharing your journeys, and helping you navigate the world of writing. I'm Shaunta Grimes, and I'm here today with Kristen and Meg, and our special guest is Cindy Heath, who is a ninja writer who wrote a really awesome blog post that I got super excited about creating reader avatars. And so I was like, you got to come talk to us about this on our podcast, because I think everyone should know how to do this. It's really amazing. I've talked before about creating a reader avatar, but not in this in depth. And I'm really excited to give it a try. So, hi, Cindy.
Hi, Shaunta. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. Hi, Meg and Kristen.
Hey, everybody.
Hey.
Oh.
So Cindy, start out by telling us a little bit about yourself, like how you have a background in business, or?
Yes, all of my adult life, except for 6 months, I have been self-employed or worked in a family business. So since I grew up, as I've mentioned before, on a homestead in Alaska, but then in my adult life, I've been a farmer, a builder, a dog trainer, a bookstore owner, and a part-time EMT, but that was just part-time. And most recently, I had been a farmer, but I was getting older and realized I was not going to be able to do that work my whole life. So I decided to branch out into being a content writer. And one of the first things I realized when talking to businesses about their marketing needs was how little they really understood about their customers. And so it was impossible to write effectively for anybody until we determined a clearer picture of who their customers were. And I had learned to do this through the various businesses that I had, starting out with my bookstore, and then also with the dogs that I was raising and selling when I was a dog trainer. Once I learned to target the ideal customer for my puppies, I was able to triple the price from $500 to $1,500 a puppy, and had a waiting list.
Wow. What kind of puppies were you selling? That's a lucrative business.
German Shepherds.
Oh, cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah, they were very special dogs. All parents imported from Germany, and mainly for police dogs and that type of work. But,
wow.
So I've had a lot of opportunities to apply this. And now I work, my daughter owns a marketing company here, a marketing agency here in Austin. And she has made this practice of making a customer avatar one of her trademark services that it just works so well.
Yeah, I was really impressed with in your blog post, which we will link to in the show notes. Everyone should read it. It's one of those, every once in a while I come across something that I'm like, this is like a pillar piece that everyone should read. And this is one of them, because it's really well written and very well laid out. And you actually make you do the work so that we can see what it should look like. So that's really cool. So a reader avatar would be like a customer avatar, or an ideal customer. It's an ideal reader for an author. What I was struck with is that it doesn't really matter if you're writing fiction or nonfiction or blog posts or anything. You need to be writing to someone.
Right. I liked the quote that I put in that post from even John Steinbeck recognized that. And you don't think of him as being particularly like a market-oriented writer to me. I thought that was very interesting.
What was the quote?
Oh, let's see. I'd have to. I think that was on the latter page. He said, forget your generalized audience. In the first place, the nameless, faceless audience will scare you to death. And in the second place, unlike the theater, it doesn't exist. In writing, your audience is one single reader. I have found that sometimes it helps to pick out one person, a real person you know, or an imagined person, and write to that one.
Yeah, it's pretty to the point. That's exactly what we're talking about.
Yep.
Well, before the
So-
internet, it was harder to get the information, like back in John Steinbeck's day.
Yeah,
But
but if he
now,
could do it, we can totally do it now.
yes, we can spy on everybody.
Yeah. Meg, were you going to say something?
No, I just, as Cindy was talking about, when she started content writing and finding that the business or the website owners knew so little about marketing, that is so true, because I found that with freelancing is that, people put up a job post for a blogger, or that they want this blog post or whatever because somebody told them, oh, you need to have a blog, but they have no idea what a blog is. They don't know how long they want their blog content to be. They have no blog content strategy. They don't know the purpose of their blog or their website. So it makes it very, very difficult to write for clients who don't know about content and content strategy. And so you have to do that work. And that's one of the ways that you can provide value to your client by saying, no, you don't need a blog post that's 300 words. You actually need one that's 1,500 words, because in your industry, this is the, long form content is more engaging, blah, 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 all that stuff. So it's definitely the reader avatar is part of that. But the clients a lot of times don't know that information, and they should. They should be
Right.
reading those avatars.
I think that the author that I think about the most when I think about author or reader avatars is Stephen King, because he always writes letters in his books to his constant reader.
Yeah.
And I've read before that he mostly just writes for his wife. Like if his wife likes it, then that's good enough for him. And he just, so she's his like one reader.
Right.
But I give that advice a lot, to just pick somebody that you're writing to. I remember Tim Grahl, who's like a book marketer, has talked before about struggling to write emails, marketing emails. And he finally just literally put a picture of someone he knew that he needed to get this information to, and then started out like, Dear Mary or whoever, and then wrote the email, and then just took it out so that it read like it was going just to a person, instead of like being a slick marketing content. So but it's so interesting. I think a lot of times writers, especially fiction writers, want to separate their writing from their marketing, but really all that marketing is reaching the person that you want to find your work, and making sure that you're talking to them and not just talking crazy and like all over the place and hoping that somebody will find what you want to say. Like it's being intent or I don't know, having an intention towards talking to the people that you want to reach. So tell us about your marketing, like not your marketing, but your like how process. You figure out your process for finding an avatar reader.
Okay. In marketing writing, as in freelance writing or website content and those things, it gives me a lot of chance to practice, because we have a lot of different clients. And so one day I'm writing to the office manager of a construction company, and the next day I'm writing to college students who need to move quickly, and the next day I'm writing to software company executives, and another day psychiatrists. So I have to constantly be imagining all of these different readers. When you picture somebody like Stephen King that's been writing the same type of book for a long time, it's probably easier because he doesn't have to keep switching. So just as a test, kind of in preparation for today, I decided to just quickly do one for romance readers.
Yeah, that's cool, because Kristen and I are romance writers.
Yeah, and I know you've been doing that. And I don't know much about romances other than when I was a bookstore owner, I got to meet real life customer personas,
right,
which is a big help. But so I just did some quick research so that which is what I first suggest everybody do, is do a little bit of basic research. Just Google something like, who is the typical romance reader, that type of thing. And so that you could just get basics. I mean, we would all assume they're female, but it would be worth checking. And that is true. 84% are female. So 16% are.
That's actually, I would have assumed it would have been more.
Yeah, that was interesting. The biggest, well, there's the biggest proportion, 28% is women between 30 and 44. And next is younger women, 18 to 29. It's trending younger every year. Most people that read romance start when they're between 11 and 18 years old with like young adult kind of romances, and then teen romances, and then switch. We're also seeing an increasing number of women under 30 that prefer the erotic and more suspenseful romances. So romance is dividing up. There's also a kind of new section called seasoned romance, where the main characters are older. One case, even in an assisted living home. That was interesting. So 24% still buy their books in a store. It's one of the higher proportions of actual paperback copies are sold in romance. The average income is $55,000. They live the highest proportion in the South and then in the Midwest. 60% of romances are now being sold as ebooks, and historical romance is the #1 category within all of the romances. So that kind of gave me some details to start with. So then I just pick a random zip code in the South and one in the Midwest. One in the Midwest I happen to pick because a fellow ninja writer, she and I have become friends, and I happen to know that's where she lives, in this town in Iowa. So with that information, first I picked zip code 50246 for the Midwest. And 100% of the people that live there fit into one category, according to Esri, which is salt of the earth residents. And I put that website in the resources at the end of the Medium article, and it is unbelievably valuable. If you were to only use one resource, I would suggest that one.
What is that one called again?
It's called Esri, ESRI.com.
Yeah.
And you can, it also sells information, of course, but you can get a lot just by doing the zip code search. That's the one you use the most.
We'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah. And so it pulls up, for instance, here, salt of the earth residents are entrenched in their traditional rural lifestyles. Citizens here are older, and many have grown children that have moved away. They still cherish family time and also tending to their vegetable gardens. And they'll tell you a lot about them. Nearly 2 in 3 households are composed of married couples. They're 40% of the people that live there have a high school diploma only. They like outdoor sports, own pickup trucks, tend to do their own remodeling, do-it-yourself work, go to churches more than other parts of the country, and are fairly conservative. So just even knowing that information and then using your fiction brain, it's really fun because you get to make up a story about a person. And I used a little bit more information, but for the sake of brevity, I came up with Martha lives in a well-kept frame house in a neighborhood filled with similar homes in Anytown, Iowa. She is 53 and works part-time at the local hospital at the patient registration desk of Memorial Hospital. Her husband, Joe, works for the city utility company. Their 2 children are grown, and they spend as much time as possible with their grandchildren. Joe loves to fish and heads out to the lake every time he gets a chance. Martha is active in the United Methodist Church and teaches Sunday school there. She's proud of her cooking and is a star of the church potlucks. She also vegetable gardens and enjoys clipping coupons and adding the money she saves to her travel fund. She and Joe are planning to go to Las Vegas. She enjoys relaxing with a book, especially historical fiction with a touch of romance. No sex, though. She loved Downton Abbey and Call the Midwife. So that kind of gives you an idea of that typical reader. And then you can even pull up a picture of that woman, for instance, on Unsplash, stick it on your bulletin board, because that might be your ideal.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
That's like that's so awesome.
So then I
That
looked,
series, like last week, we recorded a podcast with Melissa Storm, and she writes very sweet romance that's like about like church dogs and potlucks. Yes. And I was like, oh, Martha is her avatar.
Yeah, Martha would love that. So then I looked at the top selling books on Amazon in romance last year. The top ebook, let's see if I remember if that was the right one. The top print book was a Debbie McCumber book, and she's been writing forever.
Yeah.
Window on the Bay. And this one, Sweet Romance. This is just the synopsis. When a single mom becomes an empty nester, she spreads her wings to rediscover herself and her passions in this heartwarming novel. So people that are writing these best-selling books target who is buying it.
Yeah, so, Martha.
Yes. So then the other one I picked was A Lady in the South. She lives in Atlanta. The median age in her area is much younger, 32.5. So people, this is called Metro Renters. Residents in this highly mobile and educated market live alone or with a roommate in older apartment buildings and condos in the urban core of the city. They're well-educated consumers, many currently enrolled in college. Socializing and social status are very important. Very interested in the fine arts, strive to be sophisticated, value education and creativity. Enjoy wine at bars and restaurants, shop at Trader Joe's and Whole Foods, own a Mac, use it for reading and writing blogs, accessing dating websites, and watching TV programs and movies. Favorite websites, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn. Use a tablet for reading newspapers and magazines. Participate in leisure activities, including yoga, Pilates, and downhill skiing. That's because that's a nationwide profile, could be somewhere else. Shop for clothes at Banana Republic, The Gap, and Nordstrom. So then I looked at that. So this person I think would be more likely to read an ebook. And most ebooks are written on tablets, and it says she uses a tablet. So I looked to see what was the best-selling romance in ebooks last year on Amazon. It was called Golden in Death by J.D. Robb, who we all know is also Norm Roberts, of course. And it falls into the genre of romantic suspense. At least that's where I always classified her. In this latest thriller, in the New York Times best-selling series, this is actually number 50 in the same series. Homicide detective Eve Dallas investigates a murder with a mysterious motive and a terrifying weapon. Pediatrician Kent Abner received the package on a beautiful April morning. Inside was a cheap trinket, a golden egg that could be opened into two halves. When he pried it apart, toxic airborne fumes entered his body and killed him. So I did not write up the whole profile, but this is my, we'll call her Alyssa, that lives in Atlanta here. I can picture her being a reader for this J.D. Robb book. And so, you know, there's as you all know, of course, there's so many different varieties in romances. And so each person would have to kind of figure out what.
Yeah. So Kristen and I both write steamier romance, right? Like not like J.D. Robb or like Debbie McComber, more like J.R. Ward or something, like more steamy. Sexier romance, right?
Yeah,
so I wonder,
they're calling them erotic romances, yeah.
Erotic romance or pretty close to that line, you know what I mean?
Yes.
I think we're probably on the clean side of erotica, but because I've read some that's like, whoa, not quite that far. Don't you think, Kristen?
Oh yeah, yeah.
We're on the clean
get
side.
Real interesting.
More story heavy. Then some erotica is like pretty much written porn and ours are more like stories. So I'm wondering, like, what would we Google? We would Google like who reads erotica.
I would think this young woman in Atlanta would be likely, especially if she's single. And the reason it said erotic romance is nearly entirely read as an ebook because it's the ultimate brown wrapper when people used to hide their slightly steamy reading. And it says it's mainly people under 30. So I would try to find a demographic to find them a little bit younger.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Roman-
interesting because most of the characters in these books that I've read are younger, in their 20s, mostly.
Right.
It's interesting. I know people in Atlanta and they so fit your profile
Yeah.
that you just read. Just totally, even down to where they shop. And I know that's where they shop because that's where they buy stuff for us for Christmas. So
Yes.
yeah, really, really on target, really fit.
Well, this company gets this information by tracking people's credit cards. So
Oh,
they
Lord.
they know exactly where people buy.
That is so.
You just
scary.
kicked off Meg's conspiracy theorist.
I've got to bite my tongue, but that is really scary.
But like I said, we can use the power for good.
We can use the power to give them the books they deserve.
That's right. There were several interesting articles. If somebody had the money, they could afford to subscribe to Nielsen. Well, it used to be Nielsen Book Scan. Now they call it NPD, but it's a branch of Nielsen, which does a lot of consumer research. And they just can tell you everything. But even on their website, you can go to Nielsen Book Scan, and there's a search window at the top. So you can just put in, for instance, romance book, and it'll pull up all the blog articles about that they've written about romance readers and romance book sales, and very helpful things to get a start, to know where to go with your research.
That is so interesting to me because it would make you like it when we were talking to Melissa Storm, which is a fascinating interview. It should already be out by the time this one comes out. And she was telling us, she said in the interview that or in the podcast that she makes, did she say $30,000 a month selling self-published cozy mystery and sweet romance?
Yep.
And it totally makes sense when you like that, if that's like there's a large readership for that.
Oh, there is.
So there's a lot of competition as well, but if you know who it is that you're writing for, you're not competing with everybody, because a lot of people that want to write for those people are not targeting them properly.
Yes. Right. Well, listen to these figures that I pulled up for you. 16.2 million units of romance books, so 16.2 million romance books have been sold between January and May of 2020.
I have read before that romance is the most, is like the biggest genre there is.
It's second to the big thriller, suspense, mystery, but barely, just a little bit, very close. But these readers buy a lot. There's statistics in there about how many buy more than one a month, more than one a week, but they read a lot.
And there's a lot of those readers for ebooks that are reading a book a day.
Yeah.
And there's publishers, traditional publishers like Harlequin, that publish 5 or 6 a month, of those sometimes they're romance books. Those big thrillers are usually big.
Yes.
These are romance often are very small books, like short, easy reads. Easier.
So a person can do this for anything. And I went into a bit more depth in the Medium article about going into further research on nonfiction to find out what do your readers want to learn, or what are their questions. But in the same way, our fiction readers have the same needs. It's just that we're meeting generally psychological needs in fiction writing. And if you've ever seen the chart from the Story Grid, where he talks about the genre, for instance, action books are about physiological needs, water, food, and air. I mean, they're the most critical things. Crime, war, horror, Western thriller are dealing with issues of safety. Romance obviously is dealing with love, as other books could be, family, fraternal, romantic, like Nicholas Sparks. Performance, society, and status books are dealing with self-esteem and third-party validation. Worldview books, which fall into things like memoirs often, are self-actualization, understanding the inner gift. Morality tales are about self-transcendence, one for all, the giving of the gift. So again, if you try to write an action book and it goes, you often talk about the tropes, but it starts veering too far into issues of love, it doesn't fit the need of your reader. Because, for instance, a romance reader is looking for entertainment, escape, relaxation. When she picks up that book after working at the hospital all day and feeling tired, she just wants to put her feet up and escape into Regency England or some other faraway place in her case. So it's very interesting.
So that's interesting to me. Romance is, I consider, definitely escapism reading. Don't you, Kristen?
Yeah, I agree. I agree about that. Fantasy too.
Yes.
Fantasy.
He didn't have a fantasy on here, so I think it could fall probably into several categories.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So we talk about that sometimes, Chris and I, in our workshops, the opposite way, right? Like if your main plot points in your story are, if you're writing a romance, the main plot points have to be about the romance, or else you run the risk of, like, halfway through your story, all of a sudden you're not writing a romance anymore, and it's confusing to the reader. And the same is true the opposite way, right? Like if you're writing an action story, the plot points need to be about the action. If you get halfway through the story and all of a sudden it becomes about the romance, your reader is going to be confused and you're going to lose them, because it's not what they signed up for. You write a contract with your reader when you start a book. Like, you need to tell the story that you start to tell, or the type of story that you start to tell. Yes. And that's one of the harder things to do as a writer, because you get caught up and it's such a long process, and it's so hard to hold that whole story in your head that you get caught up in telling the story and you forget what you set out to do sometimes.
Yes. Now, the same research, like you mentioned in the beginning, will also help the author do his or her own marketing, as so many of us have to do now. Because, for instance, let's go back to Martha. So if I was writing romances for Martha, people often struggle with for instance, their social media. I'm a fiction author. How do I have a social media presence? Well, I would imagine that Martha would also be fascinated and so excited if you also went to church and shared a recipe, your mom's recipe, like that green Jell-O that somebody was sharing tonight on the call, or if you shared your gardening stories, because it's typical Martha is going to also be gardening. If you talked about your grandchildren or your grandma, things like that, or talk about your character in your book, her life. Does she go to a church? Does she see the church cat or the bookstore cat? You can talk about your character's life, who will be very similar to Martha's life, because she wants to read about things kind of like that. Or if you're writing a historical fiction book, she would be interested in the details, because she'll probably never get to go to England. But you could actually be posting historical things and pictures of the neighborhood where your character in England lived before. I saw one author who actually went to Scotland on, of course, a trip that could be written off pre-COVID. And she took lots of pictures and had herself photographed in Scotland, and took pictures similar to where she would be placing her story, and to absorb the flavor of the place so she could write about it convincingly. But then she had all this information for social media too. And people were fascinated about the story of her going to Scotland to do the research for her book. So the better you know your reader.
That's so exciting to think about, because if we can figure out, like if Kristen and I can figure out who our average reader is, and then what do they want out of social media, or what do they respond to in social media or in blog posts, or do they even read blog posts at all? Maybe they don't. If they're younger, they may not care about blog posts at all.
Yeah, they probably do a little bit. Almost everyone does somewhat.
Right.
It'll definitely help you write convincingly. But for, like Meg was saying, the person that she knew that lives in Atlanta, well, if I was writing books kind of geared towards that person, I would share my interests that are similar. Like I got the best bottle of red wine the other day at Trader Joe's. Yes, it's a little manipulative, but I want to also show that I live a similar life, if that's the rapport that I'm trying to build. Or now you know that your character might shop at Trader Joe, you know? So you can build on all these things that you know. And to start with,
She does shop there, by the way.
They do shop there, she said.
And you can start simply, but as you go along, and if you actually meet real life people that read similar type of books, that helps you kind of build out your character even more. But to start with, there's only a few things you need: is a typical age and a gender. I like to know what my reader does for a living and what's their position kind of in that place, because, you know, are they a surgeon at the hospital or they work at the reception counters? You can't just say they work at the hospital. Where do they live? And you can start broadly, rural, urban, apartment, wherever you think, and then try to find out something about their hobbies and interests and put that in. And even if you have to guess, why do you think they would read this genre? What are they getting out of the stories? You can put that into your story, you know. The girl that lives in Atlanta, she's been dating a lot, but not successfully yet. So she loves to read books about the girl that successfully got the guy.
Yeah.
And that type of thing. Where do they buy their books? What format do they tend to read their books in? So all of those things help you develop your persona more clearly.
I'm writing all of this down for myself because I'm totally going to make a profile. I'm so excited by this. Like, I don't know. It just gets me. I love a good system. And this is like an awesome one.
Well, yesterday, Ashley was showing us how to make a brand board on Canva, and you could make your profiles on Canva, pulling up pictures and dropping them in there, and make really cool ones. It's creative, you know.
That would be so cool.
This is really specific. Do you have to get as specific? Do you have to drill all the way down into the individual person, or can you have like a general idea of who this person is that fits that demographic?
You can, but the clearer you can be, especially in terms of marketing, the more successful you will be.
Kristen, I'm curious why you'd be hesitant to go down this far or to get like the specific.
Mostly it just feels like you're building a person, and what if that's not the right person? What if you get this specific and you're going the wrong direction? So that's my concern.
It's not necessarily the only one, but you have to be pretty sure on your research. You have to have some idea of, is your reader a sophisticated apartment dweller earning over $100,000 a year, or is she more likely to be a clerk at Walmart if you're writing a romance? Because they're going to be vastly different people.
I don't think you can just say romance. I think you have to be like that. Martha is a sweet romance reader to me.
The cozy.
And yeah, and so if you like Martha, like Kristen and I right now are both in the middle of writing reverse harem romances. Martha would be not be happy with a reverse harem romance. And so they're vastly different readers, right?
Yes.
So I think like you could go the wrong way if you don't go, this to me is the same thing as niching, where you, like, I try to tell people that you need to niche, and it's scary because they're like, well, I don't want to leave out the men, or I don't want to leave out whoever. Like if 84% of romance readers are women, and then somebody is going to say, well, what about the other 16%? I don't want to leave them out. You know, everyone should read my book. But the thing is that 16% knows that they're not being written to. And if they really want romance, they're going out of their way to go find it, right? They're going into the aisle of the bookstore that is designed for women, and they're picking out a romance book and they're reading it, right? And they know that already. But niching is, like, the more you niche down, right, the more, if you go wide enough, then you end up catching Martha for your, you know, in your marketing net for reverse harem, and she's going to be like, oh my god, no. She's going to be, no reverse harems, what is this? I don't want a reverse harem, this is really weird. So like the more you actually end up broadening your audience because they can find you more easily.
Yes.
I think.
Well, most of the reason I asked that question is because most reverse harem readers, for example, are actually married. And a lot of steamy romance readers are actually married. So if you're targeting a single woman, that's most of the demographic is actually married. So I was just concerned about, if you make that decision, a lot of single women read steamy romance too.
Well, sure. It doesn't exclude them, because if this imaginary girl gets married, she's not going to change reading habits.
That's true.
Right.
So I don't think it would matter. One thing was really interesting, and once the world is more open again, I would urge any authors to go hang out in the largest bookstores you can for a whole Saturday afternoon into the evening, and get a book and pretend to read and sit near the area where your books are shelved and see what kind of people browse there. I was fortunate to have been able to work in real bricks and mortar bookstores, and also have worked in libraries a lot, where you actually get to see people. When you sell books online, you have no idea who that person is. You may get their zip code easily if you're shipping the book, but that's kind of all you know about them. But it is not a stereotype, because they're true. There are very distinct people that buy certain kinds of books. And, we would even we could even jokingly predict when a person came in the store where they were going if we had never met them before. It's surprising who reads true crime. It was two very distinct groups of people, young women and older women, and nobody hardly in between. And it was like certain groups of people. And I found that to be true for many, many years, and in several different geographies, having had bookstores in 3 states, and both from rural to urban. So there are very distinct interests among people. So that's one reason why I have, I think, quite a bit of confidence in this process.
Yeah, I just, while you've been talking, just searched for demographics of erotica, and it's pretty specific. Like pretty specific about who's reading it. I don't have time to do like enough research right now, but it's interesting for sure. It's making sure that you're focusing your marketing on where the most, like the majority of the readers are going to be your readers.
Yes.
And trusting that the people that are on the outlying sides of your demographic are going to, they know they're not being marketed to, so they come and find you, if they want to. But I don't know. It does feel very much like niche.
Appeal to everyone, so you have to.
But trying to appeal to everyone means that you're in competition with those books that do appeal to huge number of readers. So it's like you and Stephen King and Nora Roberts and, whatever, instead of being like you and the other readers who are writers who are writing like this very specific niche, like this very specific type of romance.
But even there, Stephen King does not appeal to every reader.
Not every reader, but he definitely.
Very few, actually. As a bookstore owner, he doesn't, if it's an older woman that likes romance and doesn't want to be scared to death, she'll never buy that. And men
exactly.
Who like war novels aren't going to like it. And so there are, he gets almost every one of the readers that like his genre. And
that's good. That's a good point.
A long time to build it up. But even in business, I have seen far more businesses fail for not understanding their customer base, just deciding because they like a certain kind of food, for instance, and they like to cook it, they'll open a restaurant serving that kind of food, having done no research to what the people in that part of town like to eat. And what are their eating habits? Do they go out for fine dining or fast food on the way home? And all of these things, because you've got to provide something that somebody wants and is willing to pay you for. And
I wonder if one reason why people get resistant about niching or doing this level of demographic marketing is because we don't want to be pigeonholed ourselves. So we resist that, I wonder, because it is hard. It's hard to get people to listen or to understand the importance of doing this kind of work. And I wonder if that's part of it, is that we individually are nuanced people. We're not like a demographic, but so it's hard to like do that maybe.
We like to think we are.
Yeah.
But for instance, my daughter, when she moved here, she's a busy person working full time, was a single mother at that time, and she was looking for a new hair salon. She told me a friend of hers recommended one, so she went in there, and the haircut was decent. The hairdresser wanted to have a long conversation, was the kind of old-fashioned, kind of gossipy hairdresser. And their version of marketing was to text you with little gossip tidbits like every other day, which my daughter found horrifying. And yet some people must like it because they were quite busy. It wasn't her. And so she got off the list and found a new hairdresser because she thought, who would do that without knowing if your customer wanted that type of interaction? So it's interesting what one person loves, another person does not. So we have to kind of accept that.
Yeah, it's branding. It's knowing what you're selling and knowing who you're selling to and selling to that person.
Right. It's exactly what it is.
I totally agree. It's so interesting. Well, I want to thank you for being here, Cindy. This was your blog post was eye-opening to me, and I'm definitely going to do this work myself, and I'll share what I learned about my demographic with Ninja Writers for sure. I think it's just absolutely fascinating. It's so nice to not have to just kind of write into the void, and it's nice to know that you can do this kind of research and not necessarily have to just write into the void and hope for the best, you know.
And really urge people to think about it in terms of their connection with their audience, because even, for instance, doing the work with the Superfan book, you have to know who those fans are, and he goes into identifying all the different levels of fandom within the book.
Yeah, that's Pat Flynn's book, Superfans.
Yes. So it all fits together, especially in marketing, probably more important in marketing even than in fiction writing.
Right.
To be able to understand.
If you're a writer, though, you have to be a marketer. You're a salesperson, business person. It's part of the job.
It's uncomfortable to a lot of people because writers tend to be introverted, and they don't like that kind of having to get out and interact in person with people, or one-on-one even. So
I always say I want all the attention without anybody actually looking at me. That's my dream, is to be like a super popular best-selling author that nobody actually talks to. Like I would hate to be. I watched La La Land the other night. I've watched it before, but I love it. And I was thinking, and she just wants to be a movie star so bad, the actress in La La Land, and I thought, oh no. That would be my worst thing ever. Like, no, I don't want all those people looking at me, but I still want to be that popular.
Yes.
I want to be famous and invisible at the same time. Thank you, Cindy. Thanks, Meg and Kristen, for being here.
This was really helpful for me because this is something I struggled to wrap my brain around. So it's been very helpful.
Well, good.
Kristen and I will definitely get together and figure out, because we have a similar avatar.
Okay.
We're writing similar stories.
Well, I'm happy to help in any way I can. So.
Oh, yay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
This was the Right Brain Podcast. You can join us every Friday.